In this interview, I'm going to be talking to Rinaldo Brutoco. He's the founder of the World Business Academy in Santa Barbara, California, and a champion of energy transition strategies and policies in the United States. So, welcome to the interview, Rinaldo.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you, and it's my pleasure to share some thoughts with you. So, how can I help?
What we here at Energy Media, we do a lot of interviews about the U.S. energy system and how it's changing and how the policy framework, at least at the federal level, now is changing. And you've kind of laid out a vision for how you think it ought to go in the United States. It features green hydrogen, it features decentralization of and microgrids, that sort of thing. So maybe give us an overview of where we're at, where you're at in the United States, and what you think ought, needs to change.
Well, I mean, there's been damage, of course, by the current administration to a number of the supply side initiatives that are really powerful. So he's really put a dent in wind farms, even ones that are under construction are under threat of not being funded. He's put a dent into solar. Solar's, was booming here, particularly in California. Now it's, I think, about two-thirds of all the solar installers are without work already in California. So from an aggregate point of view, from the large 30,000 foot view, America has lost its place in the renewable energy chase. When we started the Academy in 1986, it was and is a think tank, and it was about 2005. We did 2005, the first serious seminars on climate change for business. And we've been very climate change and renewable energy focused ever since, published several books on the topic, including Freedom from Mideast Oil, which laid out a pathway to get free of all foreign oil. That path, which was started here and accelerated here with the one additional thought, the Chinese were smart enough to get heavily into wind. They now dominate 90% of the world wind market. And they also they didn't invent it, we invented it in America, but they understand it. If they productize it, they'd have huge sales, which they do to this day. And those windmills that they're making, although they're not coming to the US anymore, they're getting shipped all over the world. So the demand side on oil is going to go down inexorably. And I'm going to give you some more reasons for it in a second. So that's number one. Number two, they didn't invent solar, and they decided to become the dominant solar supplier, and they are now globally. And those solar cells are not coming to the US anymore, but they're certainly going all over the world, and they're very cheap and very, very reliable at this point. The same thing is true about that's the supply side issue. The demand side issue, what BYD as an electric car company has done in the space of 2 years is revolutionary. And the cars are so much less expensive than Tesla. Tesla makes over 50% of its cars and sells more than 50%, or until recently did, in China. And they now have a competitor in China with a full range, full line of cars in BYD, and the low end of their range is much more affordable than the low range of Tesla. So even on the demand side from the consumer, I'm seeing reduced Tesla demand for a variety of reasons in this country. I'm seeing reduced demand from the institutional side. Solar farms are stalled, wind farms are stalled. And what does that mean for America? We've seen America stalled out in rebuilding its infrastructure. So it's no longer able to build a grid that will service all this. So all those macro factors are causing the US to fall further behind the national economies of, say, Germany, for sure Spain, and France.
Ronaldo, I recently did a video about a New York Times piece, which I think framed the US problems correctly. What it said was China has chosen electricity. And you talked about supply and demand, which is a very good way to look at this. So, on the supply side, renewables, nuclear, hydro; on the demand side, batteries, EVs, and so on. And what it said was China has chosen electric, the United States has chosen oil and gas. And Trump is going to try to make North America into an oil and gas fortress and resist electrification. Is that the way you see it? And if you do, what are the implications for the US?
Well, one of the implications is not only will the US fall further behind, and not only will it become increasingly vulnerable to what's already happening climate change wise in this country. I mean, like you had massive flooding twice now in Carroll County and in Texas. because they're underwater again at that same place. And number in the Guadalupe River area. You've got the same problems going on in the east northeast. I mean, it was water gushing through the tunnels of the New York subway system today, and I could go on and on. Okay, the pressure cooker of climate change knows no politics nor no boundaries. That pressure cooker will continue to be pushing on every country, but the countries that respond to it and say, okay, we got to make a change, are the ones where people will be more confident in their political leadership because they will see that something's being done as opposed to like, oh my God, nothing we can do, throw up your hands and just, fall in the Bible. So I believe that the US is going to go through a period because of very poor leadership where it's going to continue to drag its feet in the conversion. Will it last? No. For example, let me tell you, today in Santa Barbara, California, yeah, we're back down to $4.49, $4.29 a gallon. No fossil fuel company wants to see that. Go look at the price of oil. Why? Why is it that way? Because the demand has already started falling. And even when you say the number of electric cars in this country will drop dramatically because they won't have the subsidy that they currently have, that's true. But every one of those cars that does get on the road, including all the ones that are there already, the millions that are there, are not using fossil fuels. In addition, I want to point out to you that we have now really good relationships with a number of serious business entities. Like we have a non-compete with SoCal Gas to help them plan for the conversion. Now, SoCal Gas is a principal example of this. Their only business is distributing methane to homes. And the county, which by the way, they have 10 million people in that county, so there are a lot of people to distribute to. That makes them the largest gas distributor, I think, in the world. And every day, their customers are going away because if you build a new house or you do a major remodel, you can't put gas stoves in anymore, or gas refrigerators, or gas washers, or gas dryers, or gas water heaters, which consume enormous amounts of gas. Well, what happens when all those people stop using gas? They substitute it for something. What do they substitute? Well, they were substituting for electric, but then Gavin Newsom knocked the pins out of the solar movement in California. So now we have this very inverted thing going on in California, which I think Newsom or his successor will reverse. And when they do, California will start to develop on its own massive conversion over to solar. Why? Because we don't need government credits in order for solar to work at the rooftop level if the government doesn't tax it. So right now we've gone to the point where the government of California taxes you if you have solar on your roof. I put mine on 10 years ago, and now I'm getting a tax for the first time. Crazy. But if they take that tax off, they just say, we won't tax it and we won't subsidize it, solar will take off again in California. Why am I making this point? What I see happening, Mark, in this country, in the US, is that it will be ultimately business that will drag the government into the next century.
We've argued for a long time here, Ronaldo, at Energy Media, that clean energy technologies, like all technologies, go from conception to market dominance on an S curve. And at some point on the bottom of that S curve, there's an inflection point where it's kind of the rounded part, and then it's on the hockey stick growth curve, because it's now competitive with its competing technologies. And all of the technologies you talked about, wind, solar, EVs, batteries, heat pumps, on and on, have passed their inflection point and probably did around 2020 already. So this is now not, and it is a climate issue, but it is now in the context of this conversation, it's about technology, it's about markets, it's about competitiveness, it's about total cost of ownership. It's being driven by consumers more and more, and policy less and less.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. But I think, by the way, geothermal, which I argue will be probably the largest net contributor of green energy within 10 years, 15 tops, assuming that we survive that long. And I point that out because I've done a lot of basic work on geothermal for many, many years, and I can tell you why its time has come. But the real issue you're raising, and it's the right issue, is at what point will consumer demand be sufficient enough, consumer will, to overcome institutional resistance? So to take your example, and I believe you're absolutely correct, we were on the S curve of adoption because it's disruptive technology. And what happened is the federal government basically stopped the curve. They put a block in the flow of that curve. And we were starting to round the bend as a country, and they said, oops, block it off right there. And they're trying to push people into fossil fuel. As you know, probably, the wildcatters are not going back to the fields in Texas because they can't afford to do it. And the oil industry is signaling to Trump, you keep saying, drill, baby, drill, but we can't drill anymore because we're already down to $67 a barrel, West Intermediate crude. Okay. And I think the European standard is probably not much more than that, usually a buck or two higher. So I believe that we're in a position where private industry is looking for better answers. Let me give you one primary example. Right now, if you go to anybody who's building a server farm to to handle AI or even just to handle what we've already built in the server farm world, okay, you will find that none of them will accept grid power. Not one. They will insist on their own private electrical system. Why? Because they have to have a clean, no noise, constantly up on the same level, very resilient power. Or they can't have, and by the way, Bitcoin mining requires the same thing. Okay. So whether you think crypto is going to be the salvation of everything or not, they're certainly burning a lot of energy. Whether you think that AI is going to solve the world or not, doesn't matter. They're burning a lot of energy. And those companies require a steady, resilient form, which they can't get on the grid anymore, which is why business will come into that void.
You are an advocate of decentralization and microgrid innovation. And I think I've interviewed enough entrepreneurs in California who are working in that field. They're, putting microgrids in places like business parks, industrial parks. And we see it now in Europe. We see it in Pakistan and China and places like that. Costa Rica, I did an interview with an entrepreneur lately. It's the solar panels, the cost of them are not the issue anymore. It's the integration of them. It's the diffusion of them. It's the ability to hang one off your balcony and plug it into your socket, that kind of thing. The technology has become so cheap and so consumer friendly
Yeah.
that distributed energy looks to be over the next 5 to 10 years that it will actually overwhelm the grid in certain countries anyway. And what about in the US? And you mentioned California already.
Well, let's take California. I don't really understand that one particularly well, and I think I understand Germany, France, Spain. I just got back from France like 2 weeks ago, and I've been assigned. I've been talking now to Macron and his people for 4 years, and I've been assigned the head of energy and innovation is my contact there now, Claire, her name, and she's like 4 doors down the hall from Macron. I mean, she's right up there on the second floor at the Elysee when I go to visit her, and France has these political problems which aren't related to energy, but which are blocking legislation. But France quietly is trying to do what it can at the level of the bureaucracy to keep moving things going along to a hydrogen economy, which they've said for many years they see as the future. And even though they're giving lip service to building a new nuclear plant, we've talked about it, she and I, and they know that it will take too many years. And when you build one, whoop-de-doo, how are you going to keep the water coming through? Because they already turned two off this year. I mean, right? So if you keep building more, it does. The water supply for the coolers doesn't go up; it goes down with climate change. So they're the government, if you will. It's the example of wanting to do it, but doesn't have the resources because of other fires burning. But when those fires stop burning, or if the Spanish can successfully find out the way to leverage the pipeline they want from Spain, it'll get built anyhow. And the Germans are looking on how to finance the one from Germany to France and Spain. So it's all coming together at the level of governments in most places, except the U.S. So in the U.S., because these other countries are pushing the technology forward, the U.S. will increasingly find for its business community that it's in the business community's interest to achieve these things. I gave you one example, which is server farms for both Bitcoin or crypto, and also for the idea of how do you get more data into the AI farms. So with those two examples, and there'll be more, let me give you one more example. Everybody knows that you can now operate a hydrogen bus cheaper than you can operate an electric bus. Okay, and we know the differential cost in the two was coming down dramatically when the government was supporting hydrogen buses. They're not supporting them anymore. So does that mean that all the hydrogen buses in the world will go away for the next 100 years? No, because it's a superior technology. So even if the US continues to resist and drag its feet, other countries will develop these technologies And one way or the other, this administration will not be able to control. And I want to give you a very famous French phrase. I think it was by Victor Hugo. And he said, nothing is as powerful as an idea whose time has come. Well, the idea that whose time has come is renewable energy. It's because of climate change. It's because of cost factors. It's cheaper. It's because we're tired of being controlled by oil companies for their own enrichment. And they've been able, because of what we don't call it graft and corruption here, but their control they call lobbying of our government, which has the same effect as graft and corruption. I mean, can you imagine an industry that as rich as that getting a $16 billion a year subsidy that didn't get touched? And there's no subsidies for anything to do with renewables. So, of course, the government is stacking the deck. The problem is, and this is something the government of America doesn't understand today because they're not sophisticated, there's some things you can't stop even if you want to. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. Everybody who's got solar on their roof know it's cheaper than getting it from the utility. And what you're going to see is increasing movements by individuals, not just big companies for server farms. You're going to find that microgrids make more sense at a shopping center level. And I would argue it makes more sense at the house level, except for the fact that places like California tax it. But that's unusual. Most cities and counties and countries don't tax solar, and we now know that it's cheaper than any other form of electricity. I'll give you one last example, Mark. You realize you could go out your front yard and with a couple of 2x4s and two or three solar panels, which are cheap. Everything I just told you can put together for next to nothing. You can build your own solar charging station for your car and never have to charge again at a paid charging station. I mean, it's that simple, okay? Well, that's the technology you can't stop because it can be adopted by an individual guy saying, hey, I want to get off this. It's almost like fossil fuel is like a heroin needle. You got to pull the needle before you can cure the patient. You got to pull that needle. It's like, oh my God, fossil fuel is doing it. How do I get around it?
This will be our last question, Ronaldo. There's a big debate in Canada about what energy security means and what it used to mean, and what certain, oil and gas advocates think it means is a supply, an adequate supply of oil and gas at a price that people can afford. But around the world, and you see this in Asia, it's now being defined as we buy electric technology once and then we use it for 30 years to either generate electricity or to use electricity in the case of an electric vehicle or heat pump.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that now we don't have to import our energy. We don't have to import. We don't have to worry about world prices or supply, constraints, the kind of stuff. Where is that energy security debate inside the United States?
Well, I think it is inside. It's not at the top of it. So we have an administration currently that is very transactional, has been bought and paid for by the fossil fuel industry and crypto. Remember, this is a guy that hated crypto, right? And now he's a crypto billionaire. I think that the administration's blockage of what is a natural trend, it's almost like it's like you can dam up a stream, but sooner or later the dam's going to break. If you can't indefinitely dam up a stream, because if you do, sooner or later it's going to break or it's going to come over the top. Well, we're at that place where we've been dammed up. Actually, that's a funny expression. We've been damned. It's a nice double entendre. So we went from the leader in the world of all these technologies and these deployments of technology to a laggard. I predict that even though we have a hydrogen locomotive now we've taken delivery of in California, and there's one in Canada, I predict that the Canadian locomotive will cross the country of Canada very, very soon, and the California one may never leave the barn. Okay, so even with the technology in our hands, getting from here to there is a huge challenge. Conversely, if we can bring the right economic forces, and I started the World Business Academy. It's not the World Philosophical or World Theological Society. So my goal in the academy is always to find with our papers that we write, because we're a nonprofit, how can we stimulate the business community to give us the outcomes we want as society and rely less on the government, which we have always believed is somewhat craven. Now, even the best of administrations usually don't get it right, but they at least give you the running room to get there. And if the business community is left with an even playing field and the running room to get there, the conversion to the hydrogen economy will happen faster in the United States than any other country in the world. But we're so far behind, and we're falling further behind. And the technology to catch up is not being done here. It's being done in China. It's being done in Spain. It's being done in Germany. And I think we're going to be fighting for our place in the sun once we are free of this administration, which we hope comes sooner rather than later, and we hope comes in a non-violent way. Although that's not a surety.
Ronaldo, thank you very much for this. We always like to hear about what's going on in the United States and appreciate your perspective.
Thank you, Markham.